On this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans, with the NFL trade deadline just 2 weeks away, John and myself will take a look at the roster and see which players should be on the move before November 7th.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm John Hickman, joined by none other than Cody Davis, and the trade deadline is coming up for the NFL. Cody, November 7th is the date, right?
Yes, sir.
And the Houston Texans are sitting at 1-4-1. Is it? It's so hard to say. But they're not very good right now. The record isn't very good, even though they've been competitive in most of their games. A lot of their losses have been one score losses. But, the season right now, it is what it is, and the trade deadline is coming up, and you got veterans on this roster that could possibly come in for another team and be very helpful as situational guys or maybe a key piece. We're looking at vets like Brandon Cooks, Kirksey, Kamu, the linebacker core, maybe even a guy like a Eric Murray or, I'm not sure. But for Houston, is there anybody on this roster that makes sense to move on from and go ahead and try to get something back for them in return for the future?
Yeah, and the one name that I'm looking at, and I hate to say it because I actually have somewhat of a relationship with this guy, is Brandon Cooks. Look, for some reason, Brandon Cooks is not.
Teams have been making calls for him.
Yeah, teams has been making calls for him, but Brandon Cooks have not been the guy that has been this team's best wide receiver. As of right now, 6 games into the 2022 campaign, John and myself, we have been talking about it a lot that Nico Collins has been taking the helm as wide receiver number 1. And to be honest with you, John, listeners and viewers, just taking a look at Brandon Cook's production, especially when comparing it to his first 2 seasons with the Houston Texans, I'm looking at this from a standpoint of I wouldn't even necessarily consider him as this team's second best wide receiver. And I know that statement might throw a lot of people off, but when you take a look at the production, when you take a look at wide receivers who are actually went out there on the field and actually made plays for this organization, I could come back with the argument and say a guy like Chris Moore has been this team's second best wide receiver because he has made more bigger plays than Brandon Cooks. And I hate to say it, John, you know me, you always say it a lot that I overvalue players in what they can actually get back in return. But when I take a look at the rest of the NFL and I look at a team like the Green Bay Packers, ironically, we always talking about Green Bay calling the Houston Texans and getting one of their receivers. As a matter of fact, we actually had a similar conversation like this a couple years ago during the time we was talking about whether or not the Houston Texans should depart from Will Fuller, who had just retired, by the way, unfortunately. But but I say all that just to say, I look at a team like the Green Bay Packers and I look at what they're going through with their wide receiving core, and we all know that Brandon Cooks is not the guy who was playing with Tom Brady, who was playing with Drew Brees. Hell, he's not the player that was playing with Deshaun Watson in the first half of Davis Mills' career, but I think he still has something left in the tank if you put him with a better quarterback, a damn good quarterback at that, or at least a Hall of Famer quarterback in Aaron Rodgers with a better offensive scheme. Maybe Nick Caserio can flip him for something more valuable because, John, with the trade deadline coming up, and I take a look at possible moves that the Houston Texans can make. The one thing I've been preaching the most, how are the Houston Texans going to benefit from this in their rebuild? Whether it be a young prospect that you get back in return or 9 times out of 10 draft picks, how will the Houston Texans rebuilding core benefit from this? When I take a look at Brandon Cooks, a guy who is getting up there in age, as we all know, and unfortunately it seems like he's on the decline of his career, I'm not too sure that the Houston Texans can benefit having Brandon Cooks on the roster, not just for 2022, but beyond.
Yeah, an issue with Brandon Cooks maybe his contract situation. I mean, he signed that 2 year
He did
extension
sign an
early
extension.
in the year. He's 29, turns 30 next year, makes $18 million. The year after that, turns 31, makes $13 million. Just a lot of money for a wide receiver who, through the first 6 weeks, isn't performing well at all. And if we're questioning whether or not he's a number two on his team, then that doesn't really bode well for favorable return packages for a trade for Brandon Cooks. Now,
They could
he
look
is
at the name.
the well, but he is the player that I think if anybody else on this team, we would point to and say who should they trade. Brandon Cooks would be the top guy. Um, I don't think Houston is going to move on from a player like Laramie Tunsil, who, by the way, looks much more of an inspired run blocker with Damian Pierce running the ball than we've seen him with any other running back the Houston Texans has had during his time. But I wouldn't be shocked if Houston tries to move on from one of those linebackers. And I say that because I just don't think that things have just been working out for him on both. Like I don't think both sides, either parties, the coaching staff and the franchise, and the linebackers itself. When I look at specifically Kamu and Kirksey, who Houston brought back and signed an extension with the other guy, um, I don't think the working relationship, has been working out. And I think for Houston, if this season is what it's going to be, if you're just trying to develop guys and figure out what you have for the future, then maybe you move on from one of those players early on, get more playing snaps over to guys like Cashman Hansen, who has a relationship with Lovie Smith, uh, Gary Wallow, who needs more snaps and playing time, Christian Harris, who didn't play very well in his first game out there, but could possibly benefit from just being thrown out there to play football and being coached up behind the scenes as well at practice. But I can look at that situation for Houston defensively as a reason to move on, and maybe by the seventh, some of these teams that their linebackers are dropping out due to injury or just not good play, but they have playoff aspirations may come calling.
John, let me ask you this. You mentioned Brandon Cooks, you mentioned Hill, you mentioned Kersey. Um, like I said with the joke, maybe they could look at Brandon Cook's name and maybe you could get a better trade package back in return. But do you, as of right now, see anybody on this roster where you can say that is your best trade asset, where you can get the best trade package back in return? For me personally, the only guy I can really see is Jerry Hughes. You're talking about a guy who has been arguably their best defensive lineman throughout this whole entire season. He's leading this team in sacks with, I think, 4 to 4.5. And I think he might be their best trade asset. And like I mentioned, Brandon Cooks, I mean, there's the name.
The name ain't gonna work.
It
The
might.
name, no, but I think the best trade asset right now, if we're not including the rookies, of course,
Oh yeah, with like realistically.
realistically, the best trade asset is hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, no question, Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil has been playing some damn good football. Whether you want to look at him as a pass blocker or how much more meaner and tougher he's looked as a run blocker, especially when he's getting out in space. We had an opportunity to see that on Sunday where the DB tried to make a play and it was just like, "What are you doing? I'm Larry Tunsil. Get out of the way." We've seen that multiple times throughout the year. So no question it's Laramie Tunsil. But I think trading Laramie Tunsil stunts the growth of Damian Pierce and Kenyon Green, your two rookies who are having a very good rookie year so far. We got to talk about whether or not Damian Pierce is the rookie of the year. Prayers over to Brees Hall, who tore his ACL. Well, they're fearing that he tore his ACL at the time of this recording. So, but I don't think they moved from Laramie Tunsil. So realistically, it would have to be, in my opinion, maybe Cooks, or you look at the linebacker position. It won't be any other guys in the front four outside of Jerry Hughes, which is a good point. It won't be no guy interior. They can't afford that. They don't have a lot of bodies at that position. Um, Maybe it would have been Jonathan Gennard, but his injury woes cancels that out. And I think that he is a good quality piece for Houston for their future defensively. I don't think he's a star, but he can be like an Antonio Smith if you ever draft your J.J. White type of player, if that makes sense. So it'd be Larry Tunsil for me, man. And now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem solving mode when faced with challenges in your life. However, think about that feeling when you find your own solution. There's no better feeling, and the therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals no matter how big or how small. And if you're thinking about giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off your first order. Again, that's betterhelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off your first order. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's very simple, very easy. Add your job online at LinkedIn.com. Then add the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. Visit LinkedIn Jobs and it helps you to help yourself find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/locked on NFL. That's linkedin.com/locked on NFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. And of course, on yesterday, we touched on the game, the Houston Texans falling 38-20 to the Las Vegas Raiders. And of course, the biggest disappointment that we had was the Texans' subpar performance on the defensive side of the ball. However, we missed a very important topic, and that was the injuries that the Houston Texans sustained.
Oh man.
On Sunday, the Houston Texans lost Malik Collins with a chest injury, Nico Collins with a groin injury, and Keon Green with a shoulder injury. We had an opportunity to hear from Lovie Smith early on in the day. Of course, we asked about updates, and as of right now, during the time of that press conference, and of course during the time of this recording, there was no really further updates. But John, I think I hated the injuries more so than the Texans defense when I take a look at what actually hurt the Houston Texans in this game. And I say that because especially on the offensive side of the ball. As I mentioned on yesterday, that was by far the best offensive performance that I've seen from the Texans throughout this entire season, and a big part of that was how good Nico Collins was playing. It finally seemed like that the Texans actually stayed true to their word. Because remember, prior to the bye week, Lovie Smith, Pep Hamilton, both of those guys talked about how they needed to get Nico Collins more involved within this offense. And by the time he went down, we know about the hot start he had. What he had 3 catches for about 35-40 yards. He was getting in the groove, but with him going down with a groin injury as of right now, I do expect him to miss at least next Sunday's game, because going into the game against the Las Vegas Raiders, his status was up in the air, because not only was he dealing with a groin injury, he was also dealing with an Achilles injury as well. So I'm expecting him to miss some time. And then the second big injury was Keon Green. This is a rookie offensive lineman. Over the last couple of games, you can see him finally starting to find his confidence, finally starting to get into the groove, being that offensive lineman that led the Houston Texans drafting him in the first round. And I hate to see Green go down, because like I just mentioned, he was getting in the groove. And not only that, over the last couple of weeks, Damian Pierce been tearing it up, and part of the reason why is due to the perfect run blocking of Keon Green. If Green isn't able to go at least on Sunday, I'm expecting the Houston Texans run game to just take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, losing Kenyon is big for that run game and the production from Damian Pierce. But I point directly to Nico. As of right now, the Texans do not have anybody that can replicate the production of Nico Collins right now. And I'm not even saying the Texans have been super, the plays have been substantial when they're going to Nico. They don't have an offense that's been, splash worthy or electrifying, but Nico is averaging nearly 18 yards per catch right now, if not over 18 yards per catch on the rare opportunities that he is getting. And I don't think Houston has anybody that could replicate that, whether it be on the active roster who, we thought that we were going to see a lot more of Tyler Johnson. He's just been a body. And if Nico goes down and if Tyler Johnson still isn't right with the playbook here in Houston, are we going to expect Johnny Johnson or Jalen Kemp, either one of those guys, to get called up? So I'll be looking for that throughout the week. By the way, man, your boy Jordan Akins, shout out to Akins. I forgot to shout him out on yesterday's show.
Man.
Davis Mills with the prettiest of passes, only where Akins can get it with the perfect touch, and Akins comes down with it on Sunday. Then he also made a couple other big plays for Houston. Davis Mills also had a dart to Philip Dorsett. That touchdown was a very impressive throw from
He
Mills.
used his legs. Used his legs, like I mentioned on yesterday.
Yeah, got busy with him. But overall, Houston losing Nico Collins could turn out to be the biggest loss. But I will say this: the Texans were bad defensively with stopping the run with Malik Collins. I'm very, if he doesn't play, I am curious to see how they are not going to be even more of a bad run team. The moment Malik went down, I mean, they are already a bad team stopping the run, but it got worse against the Raiders. And they're playing the Titans twice. Like, they got the Titans coming up, and then, they got some teams that can run that ball right now. And I'm going to be very curious to see if Malik Collins is out for an extended amount of time, who's going to step up, or what can Houston do to try to stop that nose bleeding of teams running all over. Today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Texans your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, plus big game recaps, plus the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
And welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, for this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. And listeners, I got you back, and I'm going to just come out and say it. John, why do you have that jersey on for the second day in a row? I know that's your boy, but why? Just why?
Man, I've been talking to a lot of people, and Mike Evans just doesn't really get the respect that he deserves, man. So
why not wear Brandon Cooks jersey?
Because I don't have one.
I can get you one.
That's okay. When I wore this jersey when we recorded Monday's show, people saw it as like, man, why do you, Mike Evans? And then we had the conversation, and Mike Evans just doesn't get the love that I think he should. So I was like, I'm going to wear it again today. Mike Evans is a Texas boy, you know what I'm saying? Out there, Galveston. Shout out to the 409, the Galveston area. Man, Cole, man, y'all better start respecting Mike Evans. Yeah, he should have dropped their 75-yard touchdown on Sunday, though. I'll tell you that. Brady, but you know what, Brady right now
Brady should have stayed retired, man. Oh my gosh,
it's bad. It's bad. So, if you guys know me, for the people that know me, I blame Harrison Barnes on Kevin Durant going to the Golden State Warriors. Mm-hmm. Because if he plays better in the finals and knocks down open jumpers, They win. Katie never comes and screws up the NBA for a couple of seasons.
And the city of Houston will definitely have a
Would have
championship.
would have a championship. So I say that to say this. I blame Adam Schefter for tweeting about the retirement earlier and not giving Brady the opportunity to say he's retiring, for him coming out to, prove a point or whatever, which is why the divorce is happening and everything else. But all jokes aside, I really hope that they're able to kind of find something now to stay together. I really hope this is Tom Brady's last year. It doesn't look the same, and I don't think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are responding well to him right now as well.
But this ain't locked on Bucks, locked on, Warriors. Who, boy, and locked on Cavs, anything like that. This is locked on Texans, and I say that just to say, Damian Pierce, man. Ever since the game against the Chicago Bears, when he had that costly fumble in the fourth quarter, and Lovie Smith pulled them for in favor of Rex Burkhead, man, this is a young man that has been on a roll over the last three games. I mean, you saw what he was able to do Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders, and once again, we talking about a guy in Damian Pierce that is, one of the most explosive rookies in the league right now. And I kind of figured this going into the draft, but almost every single week I'm starting to think that within the next 5 to 10 years, we will definitely look back on the 2022 NFL draft and say that it's arguably one of the best over the last decade, because so many rookies are
Oh
going
man.
out there and showcasing what they can do, and they have been doing it on a high level. And then when you look here in the city of Houston, Derek Stingley, he has been, he hasn't been Derek Stingley like we was hoping that we was going to get from LSU. However, I do want to keep this in mind. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Derek Stingley Jr. as of right now, because at the end of the day, you got to realize that this is the first time that he is actually going through a season ever since what, his freshman year at LSU, because he's been injured over the last 2 years. Jalen Petrie, he has been doing this thing. But when you take a look at Damian Pierce, man, this guy has been, I hate to say it, but maybe the MVP of this team through the first 6 games. And unfortunately, we all know the injury that took place in New York, but Damian Pierce should be the lead candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year. There's no doubt about it.
I think so. Uh, on Sunday, I saw some shades of Arian Foster from
I didn't
Damian
want to
Pierce.
say it. I'm glad you
I've said,
did.
I've said the one cut, the goal, the smooth transitions when he's running.
He's getting
He's
comfortable. That's
he's
the
getting
scary part
comfortable.
about
He's
it.
getting more effective in the passing game. Whatever he's getting, those dink and dunk players able to pick up some positive yards, and he'll get there to where he's a little bit more impactful as a pass catcher out of the backfield. You're seeing him become better with picking up blitzes on third downs. That communication is improving. He's not fumbling the ball. Again, watching him with some patience at running, able to find a hole, cut to it, and go to pick up some yards. Very Arian Foster-esque, and I agree with you. He is making this team offensively, at the very least, fun to watch. And Houston has not had a lot of fun to watch players on the offensive side of the ball. And the damn show ain't been at the running back position since the days of the 1-2 punch Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson had a few seasons ago. Houston has had some very bad running back play. David Johnson, Rex
David
Burkhead, Mark
Johnson.
Ingram, Royce Freeman whenever he seldom got the ball. But Pierce has been fun, and he's fun on the field. He's fun off the field. I 100% agree that when I look at all the offensive rookies in the league right now, I can't think of too many guys that are having a better season than Damian Pierce. They may be on better teams, may have better situations, but they're not doing what Damian Pierce is doing out of the backfield for the Texans. I'm John Hickman. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Thank you for checking us out today. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page as well. On the road to 3K. Can we get it before the year is out? Hopefully we can. But again, follow us on Twitter. Subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube. Raider fans, get off. Get off me.
Second day in a row, they coming
Get
for
off
you.
me. Shout out to
And
your boy Q, Locked On Raiders podcast.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.